Welcome to By the Books, the podcast helping business owners navigate the complex world of business, tax, and bookkeeping. Now, to the owner and president of Kline, Lindsay Kline.
Thank you for joining us today, everyone. This is Lindsay Kline with Kline, honest, accurate bookkeeping performed on time. And I'm here today with Kris Gross of Frito Nation Productions. How are you today?
I'm good, Lindsay. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on today. So I just got back from Vegas.
Yes.
Again.
Yes. How was that?
It was good. I actually gambled a little bit this time.
And you did very well.
Well, $400. Well, yes.
Well,
yes.
It could have been much worse.
It could have been worse. I
Yes.
could have lost money.
Yeah.
But, last month I went for the bookkeeping conference.
Yeah.
This time it was the CPA conference. And one of the CPAs on the very last night I was there invited me to a poker tournament. And I hadn't done any gambling up to that point. But I'm like, hey, it's last night here.
Vegas
Vegas it is. Got to do something, right? So I joined him and I actually won. I could not believe it because he is literally doing a crash course with me in the Uber on the way there because I had not played Texas Hold'em in probably 10 years or more. So he's trying to give me all the information on the way there. And so I don't know if it was beginner's luck or what, but yes, I did.
Yeah, that's awesome. Lindsay texted me and said, "Can you please send me Frito's number? I need to tell him that I won this tournament."
Yes, because Frito is a poker player.
Yes.
So I had to have a little bragging rights there.
Well, congratulations on that.
So here is the scary part of this. When I went downstairs to the lobby to the hotel, I grabbed $300 out of the ATM because I didn't know how much I was going to be spending at this poker tournament that I had never done before. So I grabbed the cash and I put it in my wallet to go meet the CPA I was going with. And I had one of those wallets that is it has like a wrist wrap, that you carry on your wrist. We get to the poker tournament. I'm up there to give my money to enter the poker tournament, and the money is gone.
Oh my
Not in my wallet at all. And I'm like, either I was robbed or my money fell out of my wallet, which was a possibility. I should have put it in the zipped part of the purse. So I was sick about it because I'm like, this is terrible. I'm already down $300 and I haven't even played at all. So the entry fee was $100. So I went and grabbed another $100 out.
Yeah.
And the winning, which you don't know how much the pot is worth until everyone, they close it up and you can't buy in anymore. So when they finally got to the point where we knew how much the first place pot was, it was $400. I'm like, okay, I have to win.
Yes.
So I can break even tonight.
Yeah.
I cannot walk away with a loss. So that was my goal the entire time. I just got to break even. Even. And so it got down to 4 people at the poker table. And then by this time, it's been 3 hours of play. Everyone's getting tired. It's probably about 10 o'clock at this point. And so then they start talking about, well, why don't we just split it 4 ways, 200 each, and then call it a day? I was like, no. I have to break even. That's not going to give me my $300 back. So then we get down immediately after that, the hand after that, one guy busted out. And I'm like, well, I sure am glad I didn't take that deal because one hand later, we're down one person. So then there was 3. So then there's talk of, well, how about if we split it 3 ways and call it a day? No, I need the $400 to break even. So finally, we probably had another 30, 45 minutes of play after that. And finally, I brought it home.
Awesome. Yes. Yes. Yes.
So I get back to my hotel room, went to bed that night, got up the next morning. I'm getting ready to go to the airport, about to check out of the hotel, gathering up the last of my stuff. And I go use the restroom before I leave. And I see in between the toilet and the wall, kind of back in the back behind the toilet, is the $300.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Wow.
Because I had gone up to use the restroom before I left, and that's where it fell out. So I got my $300 and $300 in winnings. So I was very happy.
And see, you know what? If you wouldn't have lost the 300, you probably at some point
Yes,
would have said, let's just split
probably.
the cash.
Well, because of the peer pressure, right? You have 3 other people that just want to go home, you know? But no, I was like, no, I got to get my money back.
Perseverance pays off, Lindsay.
Yes.
So congratulations. That's crazy. I was not expecting at some point in the story for you to find the $300. So that's awesome.
I know, it was sick. Okay, and this is what's funny is when I came back to the hotel where I was staying, where I thought I lost the money.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is going to be so stupid. They're going to laugh at me, but I'm going to go to the lost and found. So I go up and I'm like sheepishly saying, okay, this is really dumb. Don't laugh at me. But did anyone turn in $300 cash? Surprisingly, no one had.
Yes.
I even went to the restaurant where we ate before we left. I asked the manager. He was like, listen, our people are very honest. He's like apologizing, like thinking that I guess was accusing them of stealing
Right.
it. I was like, no, I wasn't accusing it, everyone. I think it just fell out. So he let me look around. I was like determined if that money was there somewhere, I was going to find it.
Yeah.
So thankfully I did. I was a huge relief. Even
That's
though
awesome. That is so great. What a great story.
So what can you imagine? I asked you when I went to the bookkeeping conference, what do you think a room full of 400 bookkeepers is like? Well, there was, I think, about 2,000 CPAs at this conference.
Maybe about
Can
the
you
same.
imagine it?
Yeah. Was it any
Probably
different?
true.
Yeah.
Probably true. This one was interesting. So this is the AI CPA Conference, which is CPA Association. And people get a lot of CE credits, continuing education credits.
Yeah.
So if they go the whole 4 days, I think they get, whatever they need for the 3 years or whatever. So I don't know the exact increments of CE credits that they need, but that's why a lot of CPAs come to the conference.
So that's why you had so many people there.
Yeah. So this one, though, instead of having like a central room where we were all gathered together, this was a bunch of different breakout sessions. There wasn't really a centralized hub or location. So that was a little different. And there was probably about 5 or 6 breakout sessions at one time, and you had to choose which one you wanted to go to.
Yeah.
And you had tax topics, obviously. You had wealth building topics like investments and things like that. You had soft skills like leadership and things like that. So you kind of had the whole gamut, and you could choose what you wanted to go to. I was trying to focus most of my efforts on the tax side of things so that I could learn what's going on in the tax realm to help us on, in our bookkeeping company. If we know the frame of reference in terms of what the tax preparer is going to need, we can hopefully make that process smooth as butter. That's the goal anyway.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting topic that came up that I thought would make a good podcast episode.
Okay.
What happens, do you think, when you file your taxes? You have a tax preparer you hire. Mm-hmm. Could be someone with a wealth of experience, very renowned, but then you get audited by the IRS and they're telling you owe a ton of money.
Okay.
And you're like, wait, I didn't prepare the taxes. I hired this very expensive tax preparer to do it for me.
Yes.
That supposedly knows what he's doing. And then they find, nope, you owe this money because it was incorrectly filed.
So in that point, I would be curious, is there a defense that I could have where you could, this is going to sound more crass than I would present it that way. Can I blame my tax preparer, or is it basically where it says, yes, he prepared it, but maybe you should have looked over it before it got presented? So at that point, I would have, if I'm being audited, I'm trying to shift the blame somewhere else. That's what I'm trying to do.
And many people do.
Yeah.
So this actually came up during one of the sessions. The speaker was bringing up some case studies where people were trying to use that exact defense.
Where they tried to blame their tax preparer.
They were trying to say, my tax preparer was paid to do this, right?
Yeah.
You expect they know what they're doing. They're the CPA. And in these 2 cases that I later went back and did some more research on, it didn't work.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I thought I would talk about
Yes.
this because it really goes back to what is the tax preparer's responsibility and what is the taxpayer's responsibility. So the tax court has, interestingly enough, they have created a test, basically. They're saying that there are, in some cases, this is a valid defense to say that your advisor led you down the wrong path. But they have this 3-pronged test that they use for this, what they call tax advisor exception. So number 1, the first test is, was the advisor a competent professional who had sufficient expertise to justify reliance? So in other words, you can't go get Joe, the homeless guy down the street, and say, he told me this is what I should do.
Right.
Okay, nothing against homeless people. I probably should have used that example.
No, but what your point is
you can't just find.
I'm not gonna go to like my 16-year-old cousin, or the guy who working as a manager at Burger King,
right?
And then when they do my taxes,
no offense to the Burger King managers.
Okay. Since you brought it up, I'm trying to find.
We're just getting each other in trouble.
Okay. You don't want to go to Chris Gross. You don't want to go to Chris Gross, and when he prepares your taxes, then say, "Well, Chris Gross told me my taxes were okay."
Right.
Okay, I think we found where we've not offended somebody there.
So that's the first test. Is this person that you're blaming actually competent to make these judgment calls? That's the first test. Number 2 is the taxpayer provided necessary and accurate information to that advisor. That's a big one. Because if that advisor doesn't have everything they need, if some important information was omitted when they filed that return, how can they be held responsible for it? So that's a big one. And also goes back to the thing I always harp on about documentation.
Yes.
Over document, flood your bookkeepers. Hey, if you need a bookkeeper, we will help you. Flood us with the documents. We'll save them for you. All right. Then number 3, the taxpayer actually relied in good faith on the advisor's judgment. So that's test number 3. So here's one of the cases.
That one basically, that one is saying, I, in good judgment, it could be argued that this is what they told me, and so I went with it. Is that what that's arguing?
Basically, yeah. We relied on it, whatever they told you, in good faith, on their judgment.
Okay, yeah.
And as we'll see as we go through a couple of these case studies, that word judgment is important.
Oh, okay.
So this first one is United States versus Boyle. This is one that was...
Boyle.
Yes. Boyle. So Boyle, he was the executor of his mother's will, and he retained an attorney to handle the estate. He provided the attorney with all the relevant information, so that's number 2. He provided all the relevant information and the records for filing the federal estate tax return. It was required to be filed within 9 months of the death. So here we have a situation where he hired a professional, he gave him all the information, he had a deadline of 9 months. It says, but the return was filed 3 months late, apparently because of a clerical oversight in omitting the filing date from the attorney's calendar. So this wasn't even really like a professional error. This was just a clerical error, if you will. Not having it on the calendar. So what happened? So let's see. The respondent paid the penalty because he got a penalty for filing late. Then he filed a suit in federal district court for a refund, contending that the penalty was unjustified because his failure to file the return on time was due to reasonable cause, i.e. reliance on his attorney. Okay, so there's the case, basically. Yes. He's saying, listen, this is not my fault. I hired someone that was supposed to be in charge of this, and he didn't do it.
It's his fault that it was late, not mine.
So here's what happened. The failure to make a timely filing of a tax return is not excused by the taxpayers reliant on an agent. So they found that that was not a valid reason. So here's why. To say that it was reasonable for respondent to assume that the attorney would meet the statutory deadlines may resolve the matter as between them, but not with respect to the respondent's obligation under this statute. It requires no special training or effort on the taxpayer's part to ascertain a deadline. So that's one of the things they look at, is would this taxpayer have had to have special training or special effort to know that that was his deadline? They found here that there was no special training or effort required. And that the attorney, as the respondent's agent, was expected to attend to the matter does not relieve the principal of his duty to meet the deadline. So here the courts found that Boyle was responsible and that his blaming, as you say, his professional did not fly, that ultimately it was still a matter of his taxpayer responsibility to make sure that that tax return was filed on time. Then we have Woodson versus Commissioner.
So I want to pause on that one.
Okay.
So I think I'm with Boyle on this one. It seems like I've hired somebody and you're basically handing everything over to them.
Yes.
Correct.
So
So
that he did.
why is it my fault? I guess what the court is saying, it's on me to check in with him to make sure it's got turned in.
That's actually one of the details of the case that I actually didn't read, but he actually was checking in with the attorney about the deadline. So he knew the deadline and he was asking the attorney, and he claims that the attorney told him it would be filed on time.
Wow. Okay.
So this again goes back to taxpayer responsibility, which is why I thought this would be a good topic, because at the end of the day, the courts can still say, it was up to you to make sure that was filed on time, even if you hire a professional.
And they supposedly told you that it would be taken care of.
Right. So probably what he should have done was get another professional when the deadline is coming really soon, 2-3 weeks beforehand, which is not a lot of time to file with a new professional. Probably at that point, he should have moved to someone else.
Yeah.
But he trusted his professional.
Right. Wow.
So the courts say that's not a valid response. That's not a valid defense, that is.
Okay.
So can't use that one.
Wow. All right.
Okay, so here's another one.
Yes.
Woodson versus Commissioner. This is actually settled in 2011, so it's a fairly recent case. So here's another one. This is another case where reliance on professional advice was found insufficient to constitute reasonable cause involving taxpayers who failed to examine the prepared return adequately to ensure its accuracy.
Yep.
So in this case, you have a return that was filed on time, but the IRS nailed the taxpayer on it being inaccurate.
Yes.
And what happened was this guy Woodson, he had a 1099 that was $3.4 million from a bank regarding some sold investments. He in total had over 160 informational returns, including his 1099s. So a lot of paper that he's giving his tax preparer, over 160 different informational pieces going into this tax return, including this one 1099, and he did give it to his tax preparer. So that's one piece. Both the tax preparer and the taxpayer agreed that he gave that 1099 to the tax preparer. This was a 115-page return, so it was a doozy.
Yeah.
And in total, they had to file 27 state income tax returns in addition to the federal income tax return. Wow. So this is a complicated one, right? Yeah. A lot of documents involved, a lot of different returns being filed. So they hired this company called Venture Tax Services. The guy who owned this company was just the reviewer of the return. So the guy they talked to, communicated with, he wasn't actually the one preparing the return. Okay. He was just reviewing the return. But the person that was reviewing the return was, preparing the return was a CPA. He had more than 20 years of tax experience, including employment with major accounting firms. So more than qualified to do a tax return for this client. And then the guy that was the reviewer, he was also a CPA. So you have now 2 CPAs that have reviewed this return.
Wow.
Then the day that it was due, the client comes in, Woodsum, him and his wife, they sit down with the CPA, they review the return. They actually go over it with the CPA. They don't catch that it's missing this 1099. That's $3.4 million. Now, in total, you're talking about, let's see, they had 3.7 million in revenue that year. So that's basically, I'm sorry, 3.7 in taxes that they paid, but they should have paid, according to the IRS, 4.2 million.
Okay.
So that was the difference in the tax liability.
Yeah.
So if you have 3.7 million in taxes, how much income are we talking about here? This is a big one.
Yeah.
But they don't notice this measly 3.4 million.
Yeah.
So they get nailed by the IRS because the IRS gets those 1099s. They got the 1099 from the bank showing the 3.4 million, and they don't see it on Woodsum's tax return. So he gets a penalty. And he goes to court with this. And what is his defense? He contends that it was a simple clerical error, that it was an oversight by the preparer, that he submitted it to his preparer, and that, so therefore he shouldn't be penalized for it.
Right.
Valid? What do you think happens?
Well, see, to me, I think you were valid up to the point that you reviewed it yourself. And I think that's when you could get into some trouble.
Touché.
Is that what happened?
So the court did not rule in Woodsum's favor.
Yeah.
So remember our test.
Yeah. Oh, yes, the test.
The number 1 was the advisor competent. Well,
He passed that.
He passed that. He's a CPA with years of experience. Did the taxpayer provide the necessary and accurate information to the advisor?
Sounds like it.
Yes,
Past that, yeah.
He did. So then it comes down to number 3, and this is where it fell apart. So number 3 is the taxpayer actually relied in good faith on the advisor's judgment. So here's what the court said. The court explained that to rely on an advisor's judgment, the advisor must communicate some analysis or conclusion that would be characterized as substantive advice. There was no evidence that the return preparers used any analysis or judgment, or that they were conveying a professional opinion to omit that $3.4 million in income. Okay. So that's where it falls apart, is that the advisor never said you should not put this $3.4 million income on your tax return.
Right.
There was no advice given to the taxpayer that caused that omission. And so at the end of the day, they found that it was up to him to review his return and see if it was correct.
Yeah.
So
the argument there would have been the only way that he would have gotten out of this. Everything else could have been the same, but if they would have said, "Hey, look, we looked at this 3.4 million, and in my opinion, you don't need to include it." And so if the tax preparer would have said that, he would have had a defense.
Probably.
Okay.
Right. We're speculating at this point.
Yeah.
But that seems to be what the issue was, is that there was no advice given, because remember, it's going back to that word judgment. Mm-hmm. There was no judgment issue here. It was a clerical error.
Okay.
So there was no judgment call. And so that was how the whole case fell apart, was that right there. So it goes back to the importance of ensuring that what is filed, even if you have the most brilliant, knowledgeable, successful, well-known tax preparer in the world,
right,
there still can be clerical issues that are overlooked. Yeah. And at the end of the day, the IRS is not going to see the blaming the advisor. They're not going to see that as a valid defense. So that's why I thought this would be a really good topic to bring, because I think there's a lot of people that don't realize. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people trust that their CPA knows what they're doing, and largely they do. Right. But as we've seen, even the people that know what they're doing make mistakes.
Yeah. And so I guess what I'm thinking here is you want to make sure you double check that thing to make sure everything that I gave them has been taken care of. And I need to make sure that if they're the one filing for me, that this is getting filed on time.
Yes.
Because I'm glad you went through some of those examples, because I would have thought, based off the criteria originally, any kind of those errors would have been placed on the tax professional.
No.
But that's only if they come back at you and say, hey, look, I know you have this tax form that you think maybe should be part of your taxable income, but we say it's not.
Right.
And so we're going to leave it out.
Right.
But even then, with that, you have to still meet the first two pieces of criteria.
Right.
And it kind of seems like to me, if you have checked off box number 3 where they've said, yeah, you don't need this, you probably haven't checked off box number 1, which is where you're going to someone who's a credible CPA with experience.
Right.
So did you find any cases where people had successfully argued this?
There are cases out there.
But it seems like it'd be very few.
Well, it has to meet this criteria, right? And I think that number 3 is the biggest one, because people have to be able to prove that they acted in good faith on the advisor's judgment, right? So like you said, the advisor actually saying, this is how we should do it.
Yeah.
Not that it was just a mistake because of clerical issues or something getting overlooked, but that they actually advised it being done that way.
Right.
So that's where a lot of these issues come, because honestly, I'm thinking, how many advisors are actually going to admit,
yes,
I advised my client to do that?
Yeah. And if you don't have it in like an email,
yeah, how can you prove it?
You can't prove it. And if it was just right, like if you and I were talking and you told me, and we're now in court, and it's like, hey, either I'm paying the taxes or you are, why would you admit? Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
honest people would, but
and I guess you're under oath,
Yeah,
are you?
yeah.
So you would think you would,
Yeah.
but you don't have that argument locked down unless you really
Yeah.
have it in writing.
And what if your advisor is dead? Or what if they're long gone? What if they're MIA or in a different country? I don't know what the actual
That's true.
laws are in regards to subpoena. If they subpoena you to come be a witness and say yes or no whether you advise this, if you're in a different country, are you obligated to come?
Yeah.
I don't know what the rules are on that, but...
And this would be happening years later.
Oh, more than likely, yes.
And so then what are even the chances that... though most of those guys could probably honestly go up there and say, I don't remember.
Right.
Like, I do not remember this conversation.
And it might be legitimate that they don't remember, because you're exactly right. You're talking about years ago, trying to remember one of probably hundreds or thousands of clients that they have. They legit probably don't remember.
Wow.
So it gets a little complicated. But so here's the thing that I've been thinking about, though. Most people, I mean, there's business owners out there that are savvy. There's taxpayers out there that are savvy. But by and large, people are hiring a professional because they don't want to think about it, deal with it, or don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
So then what do you do? So I've got to thinking about that. Okay, with this 106, most people don't have 160 1099s. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's not your typical taxpayer. But even this guy could have hired someone as a clerical person to help him with this. So whether it's the taxpayer or someone you hire, have copies of those 160 documents, whether it's a digital copy or an actual physical copy. Ask the tax preparer to show you, all right, this 1099, where is this on my return? Show me.
Right.
Have them show you. Even if you don't know how to find it, have them find it and show it to you. And go through every single one, which hopefully you don't have 100. Well, I guess hopefully you do have 160. Then you can afford to hire someone to do this for you.
Yeah.
And go through each of them. Where is it on the tax return?
Yeah.
So that would be one piece of advice that I would suggest that taxpayers do to make sure everything that you've gotten, because everything you've gotten in the mail, the IRS has a copy of it. So those are the really important documents to make sure somewhere on your tax return it's recognized, because that's the stuff that the IRS can immediately spot. Hey, we got this 1099 from this company, and the taxpayer did not include it. And it has their social security number or tax ID number.
Yeah.
So they know what tax return it's supposed to be showing up on. And this is, I'm sure, all automated at this point, right?
Right.
So they probably can just pull reports that show, here's all the missing,
Yes.
1099s
Right,
that
I would
are
think
not
so.
appearing on anyone's tax return.
Yeah.
So it's not that difficult for them. So those are the things that are really important to make sure are on your return.
Yeah. And I think it's important too to, the thing I was thinking is, man, this poor guy who was dealing with the death, was it his mom who passed away?
Yes.
And then you're having to deal with all this.
Yeah.
But that's why you've got to, when you pick who's going to be the executor of your will, you got to make sure you picked the right person who's going to be able to handle this kind of stuff.
Right.
And then that way, when the time comes, when you're actually dead, there's not a scramble for, hey, who's going to deal with this and who's going to file my taxes?
Right.
So I can see that being a big problem that arises out of this too. I think the big takeaway is, and this is always, and my dad has always helped me with this when we finish going through, TurboTax, when we do our taxes, it is, you always go through it at the end. You always double check to make sure that everything is there. Have we gone through all the documents? We go through piece by piece, everything, the charitable donations, this form. Do you have this form? Well, last year you had this form. Do you have it this year? And
sounds like your dad's a good CPA.
Yes, he is. He is. And so I think I'm going to be even more cautious of it now because it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to lay the blame on my dad reasonably from what you've shown me in these court documents.
Yeah, probably not, especially if he's that conscientious. But that's good.
Yeah.
That's the kind of tax preparer you want. You want the one that's annoyingly, painstakingly going through everything.
Yes. This is one of those times where, and I tell people when I need this, this is how I was with our realtor when we bought our house. I want you to hold my hand and walk me through it. Even if you think I've heard this 3 times, tell
me again.
And so that's absolutely the way you want your relationship with your tax preparer to be, is talk me through everything.
Yeah.
I need you to explain everything to me like I'm 5. Because honestly, isn't it worth it to say, I'd rather turn what could be a 15-minute conversation into maybe an hour and a half versus in 4 years, now I'm being audited and I've got a big problem and I've got to pay taxes plus penalties.
There you go. And I will say this, if you can find a CPA that's willing to do that, then you probably have a great one, because not a lot of CPAs, I don't think, are willing to do that with all of their clients.
So when you're at the CPA conference, and this is something that you're discussing, or this is a topic that's being brought up, does it seem like most of the CPAs there operate in a way like that, where it's, I am walking my clients through this? Or do you think it is that most CPAs are, I just want to do kind of the bare minimum and I'm going to give it back to them?
So I meet a lot of CPAs intentionally, not only through my bookkeeping business, because one of our onboarding task items is to get acquainted with who's going to prepare the taxes for our bookkeeping clients. And that's really important. Because every CPA has their nuances and their ways of doing things, and I like to have continuity there. And my goal is to make their job smooth as butter, like I said, very easy. So I talk to a lot of different CPAs, specifically CPAs that prepare taxes. I will tell you, almost every client that I've signed on has told me they're not happy with their CPA. And it typically stems down to customer service issues, that they don't feel like they're being heard. They don't know what's going on. It's communication issues. Yeah. That's really 90% of the time what the problem is. It's not even about their expertise level, their knowledge, how that they did a bad job on the returns. It's usually nothing related to any of that. It's just the communication issues. They don't feel like they're even on their CPA's radar.
Wow.
And it's so prevalent. I hear it all the time.
Yeah.
So that's why I say, if you can find the CPA that's willing to sit down with you for an hour and a half and go through your return like that, you probably have a winner.
Wow. And this, again, I could totally understand their frustration, because that would be a person that you want that communication with.
I have a client right now. He signed on with us at least 2 months ago. I have been trying to contact their CPA since then. I got an initial email saying, well, give me until June 15th, which is in Texas, that was our tax deadline. I'm like, that's completely understandable. Yeah. I'll contact you after June. I've been trying to contact since June, have not heard a word. So, and here I am as the bookkeeper saying, listen, I want to get in touch with you and to make sure we're on the same page with the books as what you're doing on the taxes. We have some questions, want to make sure we're booking things correctly as how you're going to do the taxes. You would think the CPA would be incentivized to make sure, because we're going to make their job easier if we have the information we need. But I can only lead a horse to water. I can't make it drink. So I understand my clients' frustrations. In some cases, I have the same problem.
Yeah. And I get that, and that's frustrating. But Lindsay, do you have those problems communicating with your clients?
Oh, yes. You know me. I really have trouble with that communication. Frito's over here laughing. I really try to make a concerted effort to keep the communication flowing. So let my clients know that they're being heard, that we understand their concerns, that we're going to do everything on our part to help them in whatever their pain points are. I really try, and especially knowing that that's where their frustrations lie with their tax preparers so often, I want to help fill that gap. So that is my goal.
And that's why you want Lindsay. Go to Kline.
That's right. Kline.com.
Yes.
If you need a bookkeeper. Thank you for joining me for this. Was this a good topic?
I found this fascinating, and I want to say
you're learning so much.
I am. I seriously, I am, and I know that's been beneficial to the podcast listeners and the YouTube viewers as well. They're learning along with me if they didn't already know this stuff. And Lindsay, you came into this and you said, let's do the boring one. And this was anything from boring. Trust me.
You're not supposed to tell the listeners that I called it boring.
Well, I want them to know that Lindsay can take what she considers boring and turn it into fun for me. And so that's all. I'm trying to give you a compliment. That's what I'm trying to do.
Thank you. For you to consider this fun, going through case studies. Yeah. I consider that the highest compliment. Thank you.
This was great. So, Lindsay, if people are interested in reaching out to you, how do they do so?
All right, so website, Kline.com, SAKLINE.com. And if somebody wants a website, I'm about to call you a website creator. Sorry. If somebody wants to do a podcast, how can they find you?
Yes, FritoNation.live, or email me, Kris, Kris, at FritoNation.live.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Lindsay.
And if anyone needs any bookkeeping, we are here to help at Kline, SAKLINE.com, or our Dallas office at 214-396-5020. And I still have not learned the San Antonio number.
It's going to be like right here. You can read it at the bottom. Somewhere down
there, read it. You'd think I'd be more prepared since I forgot it last time too, but we have a San Antonio office. Yes. It's on our website.
For the YouTube viewers, it's on the screen. For our podcast listeners, you can find it in the show.
There you go. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone. Until next time.
By the Books is presented by Kline. Honest, accurate bookkeeping performed on time. For more information on Kline services or to get a hold of Lindsay, visit Kline.com or email info@Kline.com.
The information provided on this website and podcast does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and materials available are for general information purposes only. Information provided by Kline may not constitute the most up-to-date legal or other information. Listeners should contact their attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular legal matter and should refrain from acting on the basis of this information without first seeking legal advice from counsel in the relevant jurisdiction. Only your individual attorney can provide assurances that the information contained herein and your interpretation of it is applicable or appropriate to your particular situation.
All right. So, oh my goodness,
We
this
were
keeps
good.
falling off.
You took the whole thing off.